My daughter-in-law was smiling when she handed me the garbage bag. That's the detail that stayed with me, not the words she used, not even my son standing 4 feet behind her saying nothing, just the smile. Steady and pleasant, like she was doing me a courtesy by making things clear. 3 days later, she called my phone 89 times without an answer. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I read every single one. Let me take you back to a Thursday afternoon in April. I had been in Lexington, Kentucky for 4 days attending the funeral of a former colleague, a man I'd worked alongside for 31 years before retirement came for both of us. The service was quiet and right, the way he would have wanted it. I drove back up I-75 toward Cincinnati in the particular fog that settles over you after you say goodbye to someone who knew you before you became who you finally are. Radio on low. Coffee from a travel plaza outside Georgetown. The skyline rising out of the river valley looked the same as it always had. I noticed something wrong before I even turned off the engine. The driveway looked different. There were boxes near the side of the garage. My boxes, the ones I kept in the storage room on the second floor. Brown cardboard packed without care, some torn at the corners where they'd been dragged rather than carried. A plastic tub I recognized immediately sat without its lid on the concrete apron, its contents exposed to the gray April sky. The tub held my late wife, Marjorie's Christmas quilt, the one she had sewn by hand over 2 winters, cutting squares from clothing that belonged to people we had loved. It had been outside long enough that the fabric was dark with moisture and heavy with the smell of rain and damp concrete. She'd made that quilt in the years when we couldn't afford to buy gifts the way other couples could. She'd made it as an act of love, and it had survived 38 years of marriage, 2 moves, and a house fire that took half our belongings in 1994. It had not survived 4 days of sitting outside while I was away. I got out of the truck slowly. My knees have given me trouble since a fall on a job site back in 2019, and they made sure I knew it after a long drive. I walked toward the pile and stood over it with my hands at my sides, trying to process it the way an engineer processes a failed structure. Methodically, without emotion, looking for where the load had exceeded the design. There was a framed print I'd had since my 50th birthday, a photograph of a suspension bridge in Pittsburgh that Marjorie had found at an art fair and bought with money she'd saved from her grocery budget. It lay face down in an open box, one corner of the frame cracked. My certification records from 32 years with the county were in a manila envelope that had gotten wet along the bottom edge. My socket set, a Craftsman set I'd owned since 1987, was in a cardboard box with no lid, sitting open to whatever weather came next. I picked up the quilt. It was heavy with water and it weighed more than it should have. The front door key had a small shine on the bow from years of my thumb pressing the same spot. I slid it into the lock, gave it the familiar small rotation, and felt nothing. No give, no movement. The lock was different, not stiff or stuck, but different. Physically different, a different mechanism entirely. Someone had changed it while I was in Kentucky. I stood on that porch for a long time. I called my son. 4 rings, then voicemail, his recorded voice upbeat and professional. I left a message asking him to call me immediately. I tried again 40 minutes later, same result. His wife's number went straight to voicemail on the first attempt. My neighbor Hector came out to collect his mail around 4 o'clock. We had shared beers on warm evenings for 6 years. He knew my name, knew I'd moved in after Marjorie passed, knew I'd been helping my son with the mortgage. He looked at my boxes and then at me, and his eyes moved away with the speed of someone who has already decided not to be involved. Hector, you see anything going on over here while I was gone? He sorted through his mail without looking up. I've been keeping to myself this week. Couldn't tell you. That quilt has been sitting outside in the rain for 4 days, I said. I'm sorry. He glanced once at my front door, then back at the street. I hope it gets sorted out. He went inside without meeting my eyes again. I retrieved a folding chair from the truck bed and set it up next to the largest box, and I waited. The neighborhood moved through its Thursday evening without noticing me. School buses, garage doors, the smell of somebody's dinner coming through an open window. I sat in that chair for hours and watched all of it and thought about nothing useful at all. Their car turned into the driveway at 6:47. My daughter-in-law got out first, still in her work clothes. She moved the way people move when they have decided something and have no intention of reconsidering it. My son climbed out of the passenger side more slowly. His hands went into his pockets before he was fully standing. He had always done that when he was uncomfortable, buried his hands. I stood up from the chair. I need someone to explain what I came home to, I said. My things are outside. The locks are changed. I've been calling for 5 hours. My daughter-in-law stopped when she reached me. She looked at the boxes and then at my face, and her expression had no cruelty in it, which made it worse. It was settled, final, the look of someone who has completed a task they had been planning for a long time. The mortgage cleared last month, she said. The final payment. You helped us get where we needed to be, and we're genuinely grateful. But it's time for you to have your own space and for us to have ours. This is my space, I said. I signed for this house. My name is on the mortgage. I have paid every bill in this house for 7 years. You helped us get started. She said it with the patience of someone explaining something elementary. That's what family does. But we're on our own feet now. You don't need to be here anymore, and honestly, we'd like our privacy back. I turned to my son. He was looking at the driveway surface. He had his mother's jaw and his mother's hands, and I noticed that detail absurdly, standing there outside the house I had paid for. Son, I put everything I had left into that single word. Look at me. He raised his eyes for about 3 seconds. Long enough for me to see what I hadn't expected. Not guilt, not anger. Something emptier than either. The way a person looks at someone they have already mentally relocated from their life to a category called the past. I'm sorry, Dad, he said to the ground. It just isn't working. My daughter-in-law was already heading toward the porch. Over her shoulder, not slowing down. There's a motel on Combs Road that's reasonable. You'll be fine for a few nights while you figure out the next step. The front door opened. The front door closed. The porch light came on, held for about 4 seconds, then went dark. I stood in the driveway and let it all settle. 7 years. 7 years of pension checks and retirement savings redirected toward a house that absorbed everything I offered without once acknowledging the source. The mortgage was mine, because my credit score was the only one that had qualified at the time. My son and his wife had been carrying debt from his graduate school loans and a car she had defaulted on in her late 20s. I had walked into the closing knowing all of this and signed my name because my son had looked at me across the kitchen table and said, Dad, we'll always be family. This is our home now. Together. I had wanted to believe it badly enough that I had believed it completely. The motel on Combs Road cost $68. The room was clean and anonymous and smelled of industrial carpet cleaner. I carried in what I needed. Clothes for the next few days. My laptop, Marjorie's quilt, which I draped over the shower bar to dry, and the accordion folder I had kept in my truck's center console for years out of a habit that had started as bureaucratic caution and ended up mattering more than I could have anticipated. I did not sleep much. I lay on a sagging mattress and reviewed 7 years the way you review a structural drawing, looking for where the calculation went wrong. The pattern was clear once I stopped manufacturing reasons to ignore it. The gradual cooling, the way invitations to family dinners had quietly disappeared around year 4. My son's habit of looking slightly past me rather than at me. My daughter-in-law's comments, always framed as gentle observations, about my television volume, about the smell of the machine oil I used on my tools, about how some people needed more space than others. I had translated all of it into stress, into busy schedules, into the ordinary friction of people sharing a house. Every act of generosity I had performed had been absorbed as entitlement. Every payment I had made had moved them one step closer to the month, when they would no longer need me to make it. They had not miscalculated. They had simply underestimated what I was still capable of. By 6 in the morning, I was dressed and composed and ready to find out exactly where I stood. The property attorney I found through the County Bar Association's referral service was named Ms. Weston. Her office near the Hamilton County Courthouse was orderly and unsentimental, the kind of space that communicates competence without effort. I spread my documents across her desk. Deed, loan origination papers, 7 years of payment records, property tax statements, and she worked through them with the focused quiet of someone who had learned not to react until she had finished reading. 40 minutes later, she turned the deed toward me and pointed to the relevant line. You are the sole owner of record, she said. The mortgage was issued in your name only, because you were the only applicant who qualified. Your son and his wife appear nowhere in the legal documentation of this property. They have been living there as your guests, nothing more. I asked her to confirm it once more. She did, without impatience. The property was worth approximately $348,000 based on current comparable sales in the area. I instructed her to prepare whatever documentation was needed, and told her I would be unavailable for the next week or so, but that she had my full authorization to proceed with whatever steps protected my interests as the legal owner. The realtor, a man named Pratt, who worked weekends and treated every listing with the same direct attention, met me at a coffee shop that afternoon. Professional photographs on Monday, MLS listing by Tuesday morning, showings to begin immediately. The current occupants, he said. Work with me directly, I said. I'll provide lockbox access. The occupants don't need to be consulted. He nodded and wrote it down and moved on to the next item on his list. I drove north to Columbus that evening. My sister lives there, and she is one of those people who can read a situation without requiring it explained to her. She fed me a proper dinner and showed me to the guest room and asked nothing except whether I needed anything before bed. I slept for 9 hours. In the morning, I used frequent flyer miles I had accumulated over 12 years of never going anywhere and booked a flight to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Marjorie and I had talked about Hilton Head as a future trip, one of those plans that assumes time is a thing you have in unlimited supply. I turned my phone off at the departure gate and left it off for the better part of a week. Hilton Head in April is quiet. The beach in the mornings belonged to the serious walkers and the retirees and the pelicans, which worked the surf with an efficiency I found genuinely admirable. I rented a bicycle. I ate at restaurants without calculating the bill in advance. I read a novel I'd bought at the airport bookstore and felt, for the first time in longer than I could accurately locate, like a person who existed for reasons unrelated to his usefulness to anyone else. On the fourth day, I turned the phone on, long enough to check in with Ms. Weston and Pratt. Pratt had a young couple who had toured twice and were moving toward a full-price offer. Ms. Weston confirmed legal notice had been properly delivered. Then I scrolled through the rest of my notifications. 61 calls from my son, 28 from my daughter-in-law, voicemails I listened to on the balcony with the ocean moving below me and the afternoon light coming in sideways off the water. My son's early messages were demanding and certain he had not yet understood the situation fully. By midweek his voice had changed, the confidence draining out of it in real time, replaced by something rawer and less composed. His last several messages were short, almost formless. The kind of thing a person leaves when they have run out of arguments and are operating on pure desperation. My daughter-in-law rotated through approaches with a consistency that was almost impressive. Anger first, then negotiation, then something that resembled remorse, but had the cadence of a person who is calculating even as they perform. Let's talk this through. We can make this work. We're family. She was skilled at finding the right frequency to broadcast on. She had been practicing on me for years. I listened to all 89 messages from start to finish. Then I texted Pratt. Accept the offer if it meets the floor. It met the floor. I extended my stay by 4 more days. I was back in Cincinnati on a Wednesday in early May. The apartment Ms. Weston's paralegal had helped me arrange site. Unseen was on the 10th floor of a building near the river, furnished month to month, quiet in the particular way that spaces are quiet when no one in them is holding their breath. From one window, at the right angle, I could see a narrow strip of the Ohio between the buildings. I had been inside for about 3 minutes when my phone rang. My son. I let it go and listened to the voicemail. He had seen my name come back active on a location-sharing app my daughter-in-law had set up between our phones the previous Christmas, the kind of casual domestic surveillance that seems like convenience until it isn't. They were on the bench outside the lobby entrance the next morning when I came down. 7 weeks had done visible work on both of them. My son looked like a man who had not slept through a full night since April. My daughter-in-law's composure, which had always seemed architectural in its precision, had developed fractures. My son stood when he saw me. He was looking directly at me, which he had not done the last time I saw him. "Dad, please, just talk to us. We have nowhere to go." I stopped at a reasonable distance. I did not move toward them. I knocked on my own door for 4 hours, I said. I left messages you didn't return. I sat outside in a folding chair in April while you were inside deciding that was an acceptable way to treat your father. I've had 7 weeks to say everything I needed to say. I said most of it to myself, on a beach. It turns out that's sufficient. My daughter-in-law stepped forward. Her voice had lost its smooth calibration. We're willing to rent. Fair market rate. From the new owners, from you, however you want to structure it. The closing is Friday, I said. A young couple. They have a 4-year-old. They want to put a vegetable garden in the backyard. Something moved across her face that I won't try to name. You can't do this, she said, and for the first time since I had known her, what came out of her mouth was not a managed thing. It was just the voice of someone falling. That is our home. It was my home, I said. You were living in it. There's a difference. I let go unexamined for 7 years. That was my failure, not yours. You didn't do anything I didn't allow. My son's eyes were wet. He was still my son. That part didn't dissolve because he had failed at something that mattered. I let myself feel that, and I didn't look away from it. You had 8 months between the final mortgage payment and the night you handed me that garbage bag, I said. 8 months to come to me directly. To sit down and say, Dad, we want our space. Let's figure out a transition. I would have cried. I would have needed time. But I would have listened because you are my son, and I spent 40 years making decisions based on what was good for you. He didn't answer that. Neither did she. Instead, you waited until I was 4 states away and left your mother's quilt sitting in the rain. My voice stayed level. I had not planned any of this, and it stayed level anyway. And then you smiled at me in the driveway. The morning was quiet and particular, the way spring mornings are in the city, when the temperature has finally decided what it intends to do. I hope you find something that works, I said. I mean that honestly. I went inside. The elevator rose without hurrying. The closing on Friday lasted 90 minutes. The young couple's daughter spent most of it drawing on the back of a deposit slip with a red crayon. A horse, I think, standing beside something tall. She held it up to show me when they stood to leave, and I told her it was very good, which it genuinely was. The proceeds arrived in my account the following Tuesday. A number I looked at once and then closed the app, because some things are better held than examined too closely. That afternoon I took a coffee down to the riverfront and sat on a bench watching a towboat push a long string of barges upstream. It worked against the current with the unhurried authority of something that understood exactly how much it was carrying and had made its peace with the weight. I thought about Marjorie. I thought about the quilt, which had dried and was folded now on the shelf in my closet, the damaged seam repaired by a woman at a fabric shop in Hilton Head who had charged me $12 and done the work so cleanly I had to look twice to find it. I thought about 32 years of building things people drove over without slowing down, and how that was all right. How the work was real, whether or not anyone stopped to notice it. The river moved south toward the Mississippi and the Gulf beyond, carrying whatever it carried, indifferent to the stories happening on its banks, patient in the way that things are patient when they have been moving long enough to know they will keep moving. I finished my coffee. There were things that still needed doing, and the afternoon was only half over, and for the first time in a long time, every hour in front of me belonged entirely to me.